Hello everyone, this is Retro Gamer Dad. I'm going to record a semi-casual playthrough of the game Shivers. I say semi-casual because I've played this and completed this game before, but it has been a while. I remember, and I'm starting to learn a few things about this game, so I can't say it's completely casually, but I did want to capture this. There's a specific reason why I'm doing this, but I'll let that be a mystery for right now. This is a very unusual game for me to be playing on here. There are a few reasons why I'm going to make an exception for this one. One of them is because it's a game that I played back in the day. I found this to be a unique game because of its combination of the setting and the theme and the first person and the puzzliness and the adventuriness. I haven't come across a game like this. There was a sequel, I never played that one. It's going to be reminiscent of Myst. Myst was the pioneer of this subgenre of adventure games. This has a different kind of a theming to it, and I found it very interesting. I'm going to set it up for you in this initial video by reading to you the prologue in the manual. This game has an excellent manual, by the way. If you ever decide to play it, make sure you look it up. There's some cool stuff in here, including a bunch of interviews with the developers. So all kinds of background and inside information is in there. But it also includes this introduction, which sets the stage for when you, the player, enter into the scene, and sets up what is basically the villain of the game here. Prologue. The evening of May 14th, 1954, in Lima, Peru. Jorge didn't like to take the shortcut through Blood Rocks because of all the rumors about the place. He shuddered as he remembered the stories he'd heard about the grave looters found 3 years ago. It was the evil spirits called Ixupi that had reputedly killed them. Spirits that slowly sucked the life from humans and left only shriveled corpses behind. But he had to take the shortcut. If he was late for dinner again, his mother might forbid him from seeing Maria altogether. He pulled hard on his burro's halter. Was it his imagination, or was Camille balking too? He'd heard that animals could sense the supernatural. Just ahead, Jorge could see the huge boulders the area was named after. It was a bizarre landscape. The rocks were eerily red in a surrounding of otherwise sandy and dun colors, and they were scattered in such a way that one always seemed to be looming just over your shoulder. Strange shadows danced over the boulders, making them look as if they had evil faces concealed just beneath their surface. Jorge heard a noise behind him and quickly turned, but saw only Camille at the end of his long braided rope. Still, Jorge didn't like the fact that the boulders were so big, easily big enough to hide someone. "Come on, Camille," he said loudly, just to hear the sound of his own voice. "We're almost—" As he spoke, he heard the sound again. It was not a noise he'd ever heard before, and he didn't know what to compare it to. It was a whispering, sighing kind of sound, like wind through the trees, but there were no trees here. "I'm just spooked," he explained to himself, and pulled harder on Camille's rope. Jorge trudged on through the sandy soil, wishing that he'd left his girlfriend sooner. Nothing was worth walking through this place at dusk, not even Maria's soft kisses. "We're about halfway home now," he said to Camille. "We should be home by—" He looked up to the sky to gauge the time, when the clouds suddenly darkened. The effect was instant and terrifying. What moments before had been a beautiful sunset glowing like the embers of a campfire was now dark and menacing at the entrance to a deep cavern. Though there had been no wind all afternoon, dust suddenly swirled around Jorge's feet, and he felt a cool breeze down his neck. Or was that the feel of his own hair standing on end? Jorge paused for a moment, debating whether he should turn around and take the long way home or continue on. He was already halfway there, so it didn't make sense to turn back now. Still, it wasn't wise to be in Blood Rocks so close to nightfall. Not from what he'd heard about the Ixupi. Supposedly, they hid in elements of the earth and attacked before you had a chance to defend yourself. The death itself was rumored to be long and painful as they slowly sucked the life essence from your body. Jorge took a deep breath and continued on. Up ahead, a flash of gold caught his eye. It seemed to come from the base of one of the large boulders. He stopped to get a better look, but couldn't see anything. His curiosity got the better of him, and he moved closer. He had to know what was glinting. As he inched forward, the line in his hand grew taut. "Camille," he half pleaded, half ordered, but the burro's stout hooves were buried in the sand. Jorge yanked on the rope, but the stubborn beast wouldn't budge. Even in the dim remaining light, he could see the defiance in the animal's eyes. But there was more than an unwillingness to cooperate in those big black eyes. There was fear. Jorge tied Camille's rope into a knot and anchored it under a rock. Turning back around, he could just barely make out where the glinting had come from. In the shadow of a large boulder stood objects he had never seen before. Were they bottles? No. They were too squat to be bottles, and far too menacing. Jorge drew closer for a better look at the strange objects. They appeared to be earthenware pots, with worn engravings on their bodies and lids. There were more than a dozen of them scattered about. It seemed strange to find such ancient-looking pots out here in the middle of the desert. "Is it beat?" he wondered aloud. Suddenly he had the feeling of being watched, and he spun around quickly. No one. "It's just you and me, Camille," he said to reassure himself. But even Camille was acting strangely, with his ears pinned back against his head and his nostrils flaring. Jorge stood still for a moment, unsure of what to do. Then he had a clever idea. He would load Camille with the pots and bring them home to his mother. She could keep one or two and sell the rest to Senor Schwartz, the archaeologist in the next village over. He'd heard that Schwartz paid handsomely for archaeological finds, and a dozen unbroken pots was definitely a find. That would make up for him being late. What a good idea, but he would have to hurry. Jorge started to run toward the pots, when all of a sudden he tripped and fell flat on his stomach. He felt something sharp in his chest, and wondered for a moment if he'd been shot. He sat up quickly, his hand to his chest. No blood. He looked around him. No one. It was just his nerves, he told himself. He started scrabbling through the sand to see what he had hit. All of a sudden, Jorge fell back, and his mouth opened in an instinctual scream. In his hand was a skull, its bleached eye sockets staring up at him blindly. It must be one of the looters he'd heard about. Jorge couldn't get his body to move, couldn't force his hand to drop the skull. Instead, he sat there, transfixed, noticing every frightening detail, the jagged crack in the cranium, the broken jaw. He thought of how he was just a skull, too, easily broken, a mere bag of bones and water held together by the tenuous thread of life. Suddenly, a dark shadow passed over Jorge. He felt a chill down the back of his neck, and his heart began to slam uncontrollably against his chest. Camille brayed loudly and began to rear, pulling hard against the rope that tethered him. Jorge tried to turn around to reassure Camille, but his body felt strangely stiff. Though he couldn't turn to see what was behind him, he knew it was close, close enough to brush the hairs standing on his back. Pulling air in and out of his lungs became more and more difficult with each breath. He tried to release his grasp on the skull, yet his fingers would not budge. he realized that he was immobilized, as if in the unshakable grasp of some greater power, some evil power. It could only be the dreaded Ixupi.